The flowers arrived on a Tuesday morning, expensive, impossible to ignore, and addressed to the one man in the office no one had ever truly seen. Ryan Cole, single father and invisible executive assistant, had survived by staying small. But when those roses appeared on his desk, everything changed. His CEO, cold, untouchable Victoria Lane, stopped walking past him for the first time in 2 years. Her eyes held something he'd never seen before: jealousy. And just like that, the safety of anonymity shattered. Because when a powerful woman finally notices you, invisibility stops being protection. If you're watching, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're tuning in from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. Ryan Cole's alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., same as every weekday for the past 3 years. Not 5:45, not 5:50. Exactly 5:47, because those extra 2 minutes after hitting snooze once gave him just enough time to remember why he couldn't stay in bed. His daughter needed breakfast. His daughter needed her lunch packed. His daughter needed someone to braid her hair before school because she'd asked him to learn how. And he'd stayed up watching YouTube videos until he could do it without making her cry from accidentally pulling too hard. The apartment was quiet in that heavy pre-dawn way that made everything feel slower than it actually was. Ryan moved through the small kitchen with practiced efficiency: toast, peanut butter, apple slices in a container that didn't leak. Mia's backpack hung on the chair where she'd left it, homework folder visible through the open zipper because he'd checked it last night after she'd fallen asleep. 7 years old, second grade, and entirely dependent on him getting everything exactly right every single day. "Daddy?" Her voice came soft from the hallway, still thick with sleep. Ryan turned, already smiling the way he always did when he saw her. Blonde hair sticking up in every direction, her favorite unicorn pajamas twisted from tossing in her sleep, one sock on and one sock somewhere lost in her blankets. "Morning, sweetheart. You're up early." "I had a dream about the school play." Mia patted into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Do you think I'll get to be a flower?" "I think you'll be whatever you want to be." Ryan crouched down, pulling her into a hug that she returned with the unself-conscious totality that only children managed. "But first, breakfast. Then we'll do your hair." "The braid?" "The braid." Her smile made the 5:47 a.m. alarm worth it, made all of it worth it. By 7:15, they were in the car. By 7:43, Mia was walking into Lincoln Elementary with her backpack secure and her braid only slightly crooked. By 8:29, Ryan was sliding into his chair at Meridian Technologies, 31 minutes before his official start time, because arriving early meant he could prepare everything Victoria Lane needed before she arrived, and noticed him long enough to ask for it. The office was already half full. Meridian operated on that startup culture intensity that disguised overwork as passion. People arrived before 8 and stayed past 6, fueled by cold brew on tap and the vague promise of equity that might someday mean something. Ryan had been here 2 years, long enough to understand the rhythms, short enough that most people still didn't know his name. His desk sat in the executive suite's outer ring, close enough to the power center to hear decisions being made, far enough away to be furniture. Miranda, VP of Operations, had the office to his left. James, Chief Technology Officer, to his right. And straight ahead, through glass walls that broadcast authority and isolation in equal measure, was Victoria Lane's domain. Ryan had exactly 4 minutes before she arrived. He'd timed it. Coffee first. Black, no sugar, hot enough to still be steaming when she took her first sip. Then her calendar. Pulled up on the monitor, she'd see the moment she sat down, color-coded by priority the way she preferred. The morning briefing document, printed because she liked paper for her first review of the day, marked with tabs on the 3 items most likely to require immediate decisions. Her preferred pen, the Mont Blanc she'd never acknowledged she favored but always reached for, positioned at exactly the right angle. Ryan finished with 40 seconds to spare. The elevator chimed. Heels struck marble with the precise rhythm of someone who never doubted their right to walk quickly through spaces where others stepped aside. Ryan didn't look up. He'd learned early that Victoria Lane didn't acknowledge greetings she hadn't initiated, and attempting them only marked you as someone who didn't understand the hierarchy. She passed his desk without slowing. The subtle scent of something expensive, bergamot and something darker, cedar maybe, lingered for a moment after she'd disappeared into her office. The glass door closed with a controlled click. Ryan exhaled and opened his email. 73 new messages since yesterday evening. He began sorting them by urgency, drafting responses to the ones he could handle directly, flagging the others for Victoria's attention. Somewhere in the building, a meeting was starting. Phones rang. People talked too loudly about metrics and KPIs and disruption. Ryan filtered it all into background noise and kept working. At 10:17, his phone buzzed. Need the Q2 projections. Now. No greeting. No, please. Just the expectation that he'd already anticipated this request and had the file ready. Which he did, because anticipating Victoria's needs before she voiced them was literally his job description, even if the title said Executive Assistant. Ryan pulled the report, double-checked the formatting, and walked it into her office with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything. Victoria didn't look up from her screen. On the desk. He placed it in her inbox tray and turned to leave. Ryan. He stopped, turned back. She was looking at him now, really looking, and the attention felt like standing under a spotlight he hadn't known was being aimed his way. The Henderson contract. Where are we? Legal finished their review yesterday afternoon. Miranda signed off this morning. It's ready for your final approval. I forwarded it at 8:47. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. A flash of what might have been approval or might have been surprise that he'd been that far ahead of the question. Good. Send it through. Already done. Now she definitely looked surprised. When? While you were reading the projections. For a moment, Victoria Lane, CEO of a company valued at $300 million, youngest woman to lead a tech firm of Meridian size, regularly featured in Forbes and TechCrunch think pieces about female leadership, looked at her executive assistant like she was seeing him for the first time. Then her phone rang, and the moment dissolved. Ryan left her office and returned to his desk. The interaction had lasted less than 90 seconds, but his heart was beating faster than it should have been. Something about being truly seen, even briefly, triggered an anxiety he usually kept buried under layers of competence and careful invisibility. He couldn't afford to be noticed. Noticed meant expectations. Expectations meant pressure. Pressure meant mistakes. And mistakes meant... His phone buzzed again. A text from Mia's school. Reminder, spring play auditions Friday, permission slip required. Ryan pulled up the form, filled it out digitally, and submitted it before the anxiety could fully form. Mia wanted to be in the play. Therefore, she would be in the play. He would make it work around his schedule the same way he made everything work, by sleeping less, planning more, and never ever asking for accommodations that might make him seem less than fully committed to his job. The rest of the morning passed in the usual blur of emails, phone calls, schedule adjustments, and small crises diffused before they reached Victoria's awareness. By noon, Ryan had handled a catering issue for the board meeting, rescheduled 3 conflicting appointments, and drafted talking points for Victoria's afternoon presentation to investors. He ate lunch at his desk, leftover pasta from last night's dinner with Mia, packed in the same type of container he'd sent with her to school. Around him, people headed out in groups, to the taco place everyone loved, to the salad chain that promised clean eating, to the food trucks that parked near the plaza. Ryan had gone with coworkers exactly once in his first month and learned that $35 for a lunch he could barely taste while making conversation with people who forgot his name by dessert wasn't a mistake he needed to repeat. Hey, Ryan. He looked up. Daniel from IT stood by his desk, holding a tablet and looking uncertain in the way people did when they weren't sure if he was allowed to be interrupted. Hey, Daniel, what's up? I have a tablet for Miss Lane for her presentation this afternoon. She requested it this morning, and I'll take it. Ryan accepted the device, already checking that it was charged, that the presentation was loaded, that the wireless connection was configured. Thanks for getting this ready. Daniel hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. How do you do it? The job, I mean. She's terrifying. Ryan smiled. The polite, non-committal expression he'd perfected for questions he couldn't answer honestly. You get used to it. I don't think I would. Daniel shook his head. My sister used to be an EA at a law firm. She said it nearly killed her. No boundaries, no thank yous, just constant demands. She quit after 8 months. Different people handle pressure differently. I guess. Daniel glanced toward Victoria's office, where she was visible through the glass on a phone call that involved her standing and gesturing sharply. Doesn't it bother you, being invisible? The question landed harder than Daniel probably intended. Ryan kept his expression neutral. I'm not invisible. I'm just good at my job. Right. Sorry, I didn't mean... It's fine. Ryan stood, tablet in hand. I need to get this to her before the meeting. He walked away before Daniel could continue the conversation, before the question could settle into the places where Ryan worked very hard not to think too carefully about his life. Invisible. The word followed him into Victoria's office. She was off the phone now, reviewing something on her laptop with the intense focus she brought to everything. Ryan placed the tablet on her desk. For the presentation, fully charged, files loaded, connection tested. Victoria glanced at it, then back to him. You checked everything. Always do. Most people would just hand it over. Most people aren't responsible for making sure your presentations go smoothly. Something flickered across her face. Amusement, maybe, or respect. No, they're not. She paused. Thank you, Ryan. The words were so unexpected that Ryan almost missed them. Victoria Lane didn't thank people. She expected performance and acknowledged it with continued employment. Gratitude wasn't part of the transaction. You're welcome. He left before she could see how much those 2 words had affected him. Back at his desk, Ryan pressed his palms flat against the surface and took a slow breath. This was the danger of being seen, of mattering, even a little. It created hope for things he absolutely could not afford to want. His phone buzzed. Another text from Mia's school. This time a photo from her teacher showing the kids at recess. Mia was on the swings, head thrown back, laughing at something one of her friends had said. She looked happy, uncomplicated, safe. That was all that mattered. Not whether his boss remembered his name, not whether he felt invisible, not whether 34 years old and eating leftover pasta at a desk in an office where no one knew he had a daughter was what he'd imagined his life would look like. Mia was happy. The rest was just noise. Ryan closed the photo and returned to work. The afternoon stretched into early evening. Victoria's presentation went perfectly, which meant Ryan had done his job correctly. By 6:30, most of the office had cleared out. By 7, Ryan was packing his bag, already mentally shifting into evening mode, pickup from after-school care, dinner, homework, bedtime routine. Leaving already? Ryan looked up. Miranda from operations stood by her office door, jacket on, bag over her shoulder. Her tone wasn't judgmental, just surprised. Have to pick up my daughter. Oh, Miranda blinked. I didn't know you had a daughter. Most people don't. How old? 7. That's a good age. My son just turned 9. Miranda smiled, and for a moment she looked less like a VP and more like someone who understood exactly what Ryan was racing toward. The juggling gets easier, not easy, but easier. Good to know. You're doing the evening pickup solo? Every evening. Miranda's expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, or solidarity. Single parent? Widower. The word still felt strange in his mouth, even after 3 years, like it belonged to someone else's story. Miranda's face softened immediately. I'm sorry, I can't imagine. Ryan just nodded. There wasn't really anything to say to that. People meant well, but their sympathy couldn't change anything, couldn't bring back Claire, couldn't make the juggling easier, couldn't add more hours to the day or more money to his paycheck. You're a good dad, Miranda said quietly. Leaving on time to be with her, that matters. Thank you. She started to leave, then paused. Ryan, if you ever need flexibility for school things or if she gets sick, just let me know. I'll make sure it's covered. The offer caught him off guard. I appreciate that. Really? Miranda smiled and headed for the elevators. Ryan watched her go, something warm and unfamiliar settling in his chest. Recognition. Not of his work, but of the whole picture. Of him as someone with a life beyond this building. It felt dangerous. Ryan locked his computer, grabbed his bag, and left the office before anyone else could notice him leaving. The parking garage was nearly empty, Just a few cars scattered across spaces that would be packed again by 8 tomorrow morning. His Honda Civic was exactly where it had been that morning, far corner, away from the expensive vehicles that belonged to people whose titles came with actual authority. The drive to Bright Horizons Learning Center took 11 minutes in light traffic. Ryan knew every turn, every light, every moment when he could let his mind drift and when he needed to focus. This route was muscle memory now, carved into his evenings the same way his morning routine was carved into his mornings. Mia was waiting in the pickup room, backpack already on, her face lighting up the moment she saw him through the door. "Daddy!" Ryan crouched down and caught her as she ran into his arms, the weight of her familiar and grounding. "Hey, sweetheart. How was your day?" "Good. We did art, and I painted a flower, and Mrs. Rodriguez said it was really good. And can we have spaghetti for dinner?" "We can absolutely have spaghetti." Ryan stood, taking her hand. "Did you finish your homework?" "Most of it. I have spelling words left." "We'll do those after dinner." The drive home was filled with Mia's chatter, who she'd played with at recess, what they'd learned about butterflies and science, how Jake had gotten in trouble for talking during quiet time. Ryan listened, asked questions, let her voice fill the car with noise that pushed back the silence that sometimes threatened to swallow everything. Their apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into a living room that doubled as homework space and play area. But it was theirs, safe, warm, decorated with Mia's drawings and the furniture Ryan had assembled from IKEA, piece by careful piece. Dinner was easy. Spaghetti with jarred sauce and pre-made meatballs because cooking from scratch was a luxury that required time Ryan didn't have on weeknights. Mia talked through most of the meal. Ryan listened and made sure she ate her vegetables. Homework took 40 minutes. Spelling words were challenging. Beautiful, trouble, different. And Ryan helped her sound them out, praising every attempt, patient through every frustration. By the time they finished, it was already past 8. Bath time, then bed. "Can we read 2 chapters tonight?" Ryan pretended to consider it. 1.5. 2. Deal. Mia's smile was worth the lost 15 minutes of evening he'd needed for laundry. Ryan helped her through her bath, made sure she brushed her teeth properly, tucked her into bed with the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 2. They read 2 full chapters of the book they'd been working through, something about dragons and friendship, and by the time he turned off her light, Mia was already half asleep. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, sweetheart. Sleep good." He closed her door part way, leaving it open enough that he'd hear her if she called for him. The apartment settled into nighttime quiet. Ryan moved through it efficiently. Dishes, laundry, lunch prep for tomorrow, emails he hadn't finished at work. By the time he finally sat down on the couch, it was nearly 11. His phone buzzed. An email from Victoria, time-stamped 10:47 p.m. "Need revised budget projections first thing tomorrow. Updated parameters attached." Ryan closed his eyes, opened them, read the email again. The parameters were different enough that he couldn't just adjust the existing document. He'd need to rebuild significant portions of it, which meant tonight wasn't over yet. He made coffee, opened his laptop, and worked until 1:30 in the morning because Victoria Lane needed something first thing tomorrow, and Ryan Cole's job was to make sure she had it. When his alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., Ryan felt like he'd barely slept. Because he had barely slept. But Mia needed breakfast, and his daughter needed her lunch packed, and the job that paid for this apartment, and her school, and the stability that let her be a happy 7-year-old required him to be present and competent regardless of how many hours he'd been awake. So Ryan got up, made toast, packed apple slices, and did it all over again. Boom. Tuesday started like every other Tuesday, right up until the moment it didn't. Ryan arrived at 8:29. Victoria's coffee was ready by 8:33. The budget projections he'd rebuilt last night were formatted and waiting by 8:35. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then the flowers arrived. Ryan was reviewing the morning schedule when the delivery man appeared at his desk, young, bored, holding an arrangement so large it seemed absurd in an office setting. 24 roses, white and cream and pale pink, arranged with that expensive carelessness that only came from a florist where individual stems cost more than most people's lunches. Delivery for Ryan Cole? Every conversation in the executive suite stopped. Miranda looked up from her office. James paused mid-phone call. And through the glass walls of her domain, Victoria Lane turned away from her computer screen and stared directly at Ryan's desk. "That's me," Ryan heard himself say, even though he couldn't understand why anyone would be sending him flowers. The delivery man set the arrangement down with a thud that seemed too loud in the sudden silence. "Sign here," Ryan signed. The delivery man left, and Ryan was left sitting at his desk with 24 roses and the undivided attention of everyone in a 50-foot radius. "Someone's got an admirer," Miranda said, her voice carrying that teasing lilt that made it clear she thought this was delightful. Ryan barely heard her. He was too focused on the small card tucked between the roses, his name written in elegant script. He pulled it free with hands that weren't quite steady. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. DD." Ryan's mind spun through possibilities, landed nowhere useful. He didn't know anyone who would send flowers, didn't have anyone in his life who would make this kind of gesture. His world was small by necessity. Mia, work, the handful of other parents he exchanged polite conversation with at school pickup. No one who would... "Who are they from?" Victoria's voice cut through his confusion. Ryan looked up to find her standing in her doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable, except for something sharp in her eyes that he didn't recognize. "I don't know." "The card?" Ryan held it up, aware that every word of this conversation was being absorbed by Miranda and James, and probably half the other staff who had line of sight to his desk. "Just says thank you and signed with the letter D." Mysterious. Victoria's tone suggested she found it anything but delightful. "You must have made quite an impression on someone." "I honestly don't." "Put them somewhere they won't be distracting. You have work to do." She turned and walked back into her office before Ryan could respond. The glass door clicked shut with more force than necessary. Around him, people slowly returned to their computers, their phone calls, their pretense that nothing interesting had just happened. Ryan moved the flowers to the corner of his desk, as far from his line of sight as he could manage without actually removing them from the space. They sat there like a statement he didn't understand, expensive and absurd and impossible to ignore. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "I hope the flowers made you smile. You deserve to be celebrated. Daniel. The name clicked into place suddenly, violently, pulling a memory from months ago that Ryan had almost forgotten. The parking garage. Late evening. A man sitting in his car crying so hard he couldn't hide it. Ryan had been heading home, already late for pickup, but something about the sound had made him stop, made him tap on the window. "Are you okay?" The man, Daniel, had looked up with the raw, broken expression of someone whose life had just collapsed. "My wife left. Took the kids. I came to work because I didn't know where else to go." Ryan had stood there in that parking garage and done the only thing he knew how to do. He'd listened. He'd let Daniel talk through the pain until the worst of it had subsided into something almost manageable. He'd shared, carefully, that he understood what it felt like when your family was rearranged into shapes you didn't recognize, and then he'd gone home to Mia without thinking about it again. Apparently, Daniel had thought about it. Ryan stared at his phone, at the flowers, at the card that now made sense in a way that was somehow worse than not understanding. This wasn't romance, this was gratitude. But in an office where Ryan had been invisible for 2 years, where no one knew about his daughter or his late wife or the parking garage conversation that had apparently meant more to Daniel than Ryan had realized, the flowers might as well have been a spotlight. Victoria didn't come out of her office for the rest of the morning. She sent requests via email, her messages terser than usual, stripped of even the minimal pleasantries she sometimes included. Ryan handled them all with his usual efficiency, but something had shifted. The air felt different, charged. At noon, Miranda appeared at his desk. "So," she said, settling into the posture of someone who intended to stay for a full conversation. "Daniel Mercer, VP at Henderson Industries." "That Daniel?" Ryan blinked. "I don't know his last name." "Well, that's who sent the flowers. I recognize the card design. His assistant uses the same florist Victoria does. Expensive taste." "It's not what it looks like." "What does it look like?" "Like something it isn't." Ryan kept his voice low, aware that they were still very much on display. He was going through something difficult. I listened. That's all. That's all? Miranda raised an eyebrow. Honey, men don't send 24 roses for that's all. It was a parking garage conversation months ago. I barely remember it. He remembered you. Ryan didn't have a response to that. Miranda studied him with the assessing look of someone recalculating assumptions. You're full of surprises, Ryan Cole. I'm really not. Sure. She smiled, but there was something knowing in it. Just so you're aware, Victoria saw those flowers and looked like someone had personally offended her. I've worked with her for 4 years, and I've never seen her look at another human being the way she looked at your desk this morning. She was annoyed that I was distracted. That wasn't annoyance, that was jealousy. The word hit Ryan like cold water. That's not possible. Why not? Because she's Victoria Lane, and I'm the man she sees every single day. The one who anticipates her needs before she asks. The one who makes her life run smoothly. The one she's started to depend on without meaning to. Miranda's expression softened. You're not as invisible as you think, Ryan. Before he could process that, his phone rang. Victoria. He picked up immediately. My office. Now. The line went dead. Miranda gave him a look that clearly said, told you so, and walked away. Ryan stood, straightened his shirt, and crossed the 15 feet to Victoria's door, feeling like he was walking into something he wasn't prepared for. She was standing by her window when he entered, back to the door, silhouette sharp against the afternoon light. Close the door. Ryan did. The click seemed final. I'm promoting you. Whatever Ryan had expected, it wasn't that. I'm sorry? Victoria turned. Her face was composed, controlled, but her eyes held something fierce and barely contained. You've been my executive assistant for 2 years. You've been excellent at it. I'm making you my chief of staff. Victoria, I don't... It comes with a 40% salary increase, an office of your own, direct reports, and positioning for advancement into actual leadership if you want it. She said it all in the tone she used for board presentations. Factual, unarguable, already decided. Your first day in the new role is Monday. Ryan's mind was racing, trying to find the logic in this that didn't involve Miranda's interpretation. This is very sudden. I've been considering it. Since when? Does it matter? It matters if this is a reaction to... To what? Victoria's voice was sharp now, that fierce thing in her eyes breaking through the control. To someone finally noticing that you're exceptional? To flowers appearing on your desk like you're some prize to be won by whoever decides to pay attention? They're not romantic. I don't care if they're romantic. She moved closer, and Ryan realized with a start that he'd never been this close to her before. Never been in her office with the door closed, and her attention fully, completely focused on him. I care that I've had you at the desk outside my office for 2 years, and I've walked past you every single morning without seeing you, and now someone else sees you, and I... She stopped, closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the control was back, but shakier than before. Take the promotion, Ryan. You've earned it. And if I say no? Why would you say no? Because this felt dangerous. Because working directly with Victoria, being in her orbit even more than he already was, would make the careful boundaries he'd built around his life impossible to maintain. Because he could hear something in her voice that terrified him. Not anger, but something raw that suggested Miranda might have been right about what Victoria felt when she saw those flowers. But Ryan had a daughter who needed new shoes because she'd outgrown the old ones. A daughter whose school expenses kept climbing. A daughter whose future depended on him making smart decisions about money and stability. 40% salary increase. His own office. Actual advancement potential. I'll take it, Ryan heard himself say. Victoria nodded once, sharp and satisfied. Good. We'll announce it Friday. Your desk moves Monday. Where? Right outside my office, where I can see you. The way she said it, like proximity was the point, like visibility was what she was claiming, made Ryan's pulse spike. This wasn't just a promotion. This was Victoria Lane deciding that if someone was going to notice Ryan Cole, it was going to be her. Understood. That's all. Ryan left her office on legs that didn't feel quite steady. Back at his desk, the one that would stop being his desk in less than a week, the flowers seemed to be mocking him. He pulled his phone out and called Daniel's number before he could overthink it. Daniel answered on the second ring. "Ryan, did you get them?" "I got them."
"Daniel, you can't. This is too much." "It's not enough." Daniel's voice was warm, grateful, completely unaware of what he'd just set into motion. "You saved my life that night. I'm not exaggerating. I was in a very dark place, and you stopped. You listened. You cared when you had absolutely no reason to care. Anyone would have, but no one else did. You did." A pause. "I looked you up after. Found out you work at Meridian. I wanted to thank you properly. The flowers are beautiful, but nothing. Let someone appreciate you, Ryan. You deserve it." The call ended before Ryan could explain that appreciation wasn't the problem. The problem was that Victoria Lane had just promoted him out of what might have been jealousy, and Miranda thought Victoria had feelings for him, and Daniel's flowers had somehow turned Ryan's carefully invisible existence into something visible and complicated. His phone buzzed again. A text from Mia's school. "Reminder, spring play auditions Friday, 3 p.m. Please confirm attendance." Ryan closed his eyes. Right. The play. The one Mia was excited about. The one that happened to fall on the same day Victoria was announcing his promotion to the entire company. He'd make it work. He always made it work, even when work was becoming something he didn't quite recognize anymore. Friday morning arrived with the weight of everything Ryan had been trying not to think about for 3 days. The promotion announcement, Mia's audition, the flowers that had multiplied, because of course they had multiplied. Wednesday had brought a second arrangement, Thursday, a third. Each one more elaborate than the last, each one with a card from Daniel expressing gratitude that felt increasingly disproportionate to a single conversation in a parking garage. By Friday morning, Ryan's desk looked like a botanical garden had staged an invasion. Victoria hadn't said a word about them. She'd simply moved past them each morning with her jaw set and her eyes fixed straight ahead, and somehow her silence was worse than any comment would have been. The promotion announcement was scheduled for 10, the all-hands meeting where Victoria would introduce her new chief of staff to a company that mostly didn't know his name. Ryan had worn his best suit, the charcoal one he saved for the rare occasions when visibility was unavoidable. He'd triple-checked the presentation materials Victoria would need. He'd arrived at 8:15 instead of his usual 8:29, because something about today required extra preparation time he couldn't quite articulate. Miranda caught him in the break room at 8:45, where he was making Victoria's coffee with hands that were steadier than he felt. "Big day," she said, pouring herself tea with the casual ease of someone who wasn't about to have their entire professional identity reshuffled in front of an audience. "Yeah." "You ready?" "Does it matter if I'm not?" Miranda laughed, but there was sympathy in it. "Fair point. For what it's worth, you'll be great at this. You've basically been doing the job already. Now you'll just have the title and the pay to match." "And the visibility. That bothering you?" Ryan added cream to Victoria's coffee, measured precisely the way she preferred. "I've worked very hard to not be visible." "Why?" The question was gentle, but it hit something raw. Ryan kept his eyes on the coffee. "Because visible means expectations. Expectations mean pressure. And pressure means—" He stopped. Miranda waited. "I have a daughter," Ryan said finally. "She's 7. I'm all she has. This job pays for her life, for our apartment, her school, everything. If I mess up, if I can't handle the pressure, if being chief of staff turns out to be more than I can manage while still being a functional parent, you won't mess up. You don't know that. I know you rebuilt budget projections until 1:30 in the morning on Tuesday and still showed up the next day like you'd gotten 8 hours of sleep. I know you've never missed a deadline, never dropped a ball, never given Victoria anything less than exactly what she needed." Miranda's voice was firm. "You're not going to suddenly become incompetent because your title changed." Ryan wanted to believe her. The logical part of his brain knew she was probably right, but the part of him that had been running on anxiety and coffee and sheer determination for 3 years kept whispering that he was one mistake away from losing everything. "Thanks," he said, because Miranda was trying to help, and he didn't have the energy to explain all the ways her confidence felt dangerous. She touched his arm briefly.
Your daughter's lucky to have you. Ryan just nodded and carried Victoria's coffee back to his desk. The desk that would stop being his in 3 days. When he moved into the office, they were preparing for him down the hall. Closer to Victoria. More visible. Less safe. The flowers mocked him from their corner. Ryan ignored them and opened his laptop. At 9:47, his phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Good luck with the announcement today. You're going to be amazing. Ryan stared at the message. He'd never mentioned the promotion to Daniel, which meant Daniel had heard about it through the professional network that connected everyone at their level in the city's tech scene, which meant people were talking, which meant the invisibility Ryan had built his entire strategy around was already gone. He didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound ungrateful or paranoid. At 9:55, Victoria emerged from her office. She was wearing the navy suit she saved for important presentations, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look even more formidable than usual. She glanced at Ryan's desk, at the flowers, and something flickered across her face too quickly to name. Ready? She asked. Yes. Good, let's go. The conference room was already packed. Every chair filled, people standing along the walls, faces turned expectantly toward the front, where Victoria would stand and reshape Ryan's life in front of everyone. He recognized most of them, the product team, the engineers, the marketing people who always talked too loudly in the hallways. People he'd passed 1,000 times without them seeing him. They were all seeing him now. Victoria moved to the front of the room with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her right to command attention. Ryan followed, acutely aware of every eye tracking his movement, and took the seat she indicated at the front table. Thank you all for coming, Victoria began, and the room settled into attentive silence. I'll keep this brief. As Meridian continues to scale, it's become clear that we need additional leadership infrastructure to support our growth trajectory. To that end, I'm pleased to announce the creation of a new role, Chief of Staff, and the promotion of Ryan Cole to fill it. Polite applause rippled through the room. Ryan kept his expression neutral, professional, giving away nothing of the panic currently trying to claw its way up his throat. Many of you know Ryan as my executive assistant, Victoria continued, and something in her tone made it clear she was aware most of them didn't know Ryan at all. What you may not know is that he's been instrumental in virtually every major decision this company has made over the past 2 years. He has an extraordinary capacity for strategic thinking, operational excellence, and the kind of detailed execution that makes complex initiatives actually work. She was looking at the room, but Ryan felt like she was talking to him, or about him, or building a case for something that went beyond this promotion. In his new role, Ryan will have direct oversight of several key functions, including executive operations, strategic planning, and cross-functional coordination. He'll report directly to me and will be empowered to make decisions on behalf of the executive team. Victoria paused, and now she did look directly at him. He's earned this opportunity. I expect you all to support him in it. More applause. Louder this time. People were nodding, making eye contact with Ryan in a way they never had before. Across the room, Miranda was smiling like a proud parent. James from technology looked impressed. Even the product team, who usually treated anyone outside engineering like they were fundamentally less intelligent, seemed receptive. Questions? Victoria asked. A woman from marketing raised her hand. Will Ryan still be handling executive scheduling? No, we're hiring a new EA to take over those functions. Ryan's focus will be strategic, not administrative. Who will we report operational issues to? Ryan, Victoria said simply. He'll be your primary point of contact for anything that requires executive attention or cross-team coordination. The questions continued. Ryan answered the ones directed at him with the same careful competence he brought to everything, aware that each response was being evaluated, measured, judged against whatever assumptions people had formed about the quiet guy who used to sit outside Victoria's office. By the time the meeting ended at 10:47, Ryan felt like he'd run a marathon. People approached him afterward, handshakes, congratulations, offers to grab coffee and discuss projects. He smiled, thanked them, made vague promises to follow up, and tried not to think about the fact that his carefully constructed invisibility had just been incinerated in front of 50 people. Victoria caught his arm as the crowd thinned. My office. 5 minutes. She left before he could respond. Ryan made his way through the remaining well-wishers and arrived at her office to find the door open and Victoria standing by her window again, that position she seemed to favor when she needed to say something difficult. He closed the door, waited. "You look terrified up there," Victoria said without turning around. "I wasn't terrified. You were terrified. Your jaw was tight, your shoulders were tense, and you kept looking at the door like you were planning an escape route." Now she turned, and her expression was softer than he'd seen it in days. "Why?" Ryan considered lying, considered deflecting, settled on honesty because he was too tired for anything else. "Because I've spent 2 years being invisible on purpose, and you just made it impossible for me to be invisible anymore." "Why would you want to be invisible?" "Because visibility creates expectations I can't afford to fail at meeting." "You won't fail." "You don't know that." "I do know that." Victoria moved closer, and Ryan realized she was doing that thing again, focusing on him with an intensity that made the rest of the world feel distant. "I've watched you handle impossible demands with impossible deadlines while maintaining a level of quality that would make most people quit from the stress. You're not going to suddenly collapse under pressure you've already been managing." "That's what Miranda said." "Miranda's right." "But what if—" "Ryan," Victoria's voice was sharp enough to cut through the spiral. "Stop. You're catastrophizing. It's a promotion, not a death sentence." "It feels bigger than that." "It is bigger than that." She said it quietly, and something in her tone made Ryan's pulse spike. "And we both know this isn't actually about the job." The air between them felt suddenly charged. Ryan knew he should step back, should redirect this conversation somewhere safer, but he couldn't seem to move. "The flowers upset you," he heard himself say. "The flowers were inappropriate. They weren't romantic." "I know what they were." Victoria's eyes were fierce again, that barely controlled thing rising back to the surface. "They were someone claiming credit for noticing you, for seeing what I'd been—" She stopped, looked away. When she looked back, her control was shakier than Ryan had ever seen it. "I've been taking you for granted," she said, "walking past your desk every morning like you were furniture, sending emails at 11 at night because I assumed you'd handle them without complaint, never asking about your life outside this building because it was easier not to know." Victoria, and then Daniel Mercer sent flowers, and I realized I'd spent 2 years not seeing the most competent person in this company, not seeing someone who— She stopped again, and this time the pause felt deliberate, careful. "Someone who matters." The word hung between them. Matters. Not matters to the company, just matters. Ryan's heart was beating too fast. "I need to leave by 2:30 today." The abrupt subject change seemed to catch Victoria off guard. "What?" "My daughter has a school event, a play audition. I need to leave by 2:30 to make it." "You have a daughter?" "Yes." "How old?" 7. Victoria stared at him like he'd just announced he was secretly an astronaut. 7 years old? And you've been, all this time, being a single parent and working 70 hours a week? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked. The words came out sharper than Ryan intended, but he didn't take them back, because it was true. In 2 years, Victoria had never asked about his life, had never wondered why he never stayed for happy hours, or why he ate lunch at his desk, or why he arrived early and left exactly on time. She'd simply accepted his competence without questioning what it cost him. Victoria's expression shifted, something that might have been guilt or shame or recognition. "You're right, I didn't ask. I should have." "It wouldn't have changed anything. It would have changed how I saw you. I didn't want to be seen." "I know." She said it gently. "But you are seen now by Daniel, by me, by the entire company as of 30 minutes ago. So the question is, what are you going to do about it?" Ryan didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had too many answers, all of them complicated by the fact that Victoria Lane was standing 3 feet away looking at him like he was something valuable she'd almost lost and didn't know how to hold on to. His phone buzzed, a reminder about Mia's audition. "I need to go prepare for this afternoon's meetings," Ryan said, stepping back deliberately. "Unless you need something else?" Victoria held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. "Go. And Ryan,
Leave at 2:30. That's not a request. It's an order. Thank you. He left her office before the gratitude in his throat could become something more complicated. Back at his desk, his temporary desk, since Monday would bring new space, new responsibilities, new everything, Ryan pulled up the schedule and started working. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of congratulations and questions, and people suddenly very interested in talking to him. By noon, Ryan had fielded 17 project requests, set up 9 meetings for next week, and politely declined 4 lunch invitations because he still ate at his desk, and that wasn't going to change just because his title had. At 1:15, Miranda appeared with actual lunch, a sandwich from the good deli, not the corporate cafeteria. "Thought you might need actual food today," she said, setting it on his desk. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." She pulled up a chair, clearly planning to stay. "So, that announcement. Victoria made you sound like you personally built this company from scratch." She was being generous. She was being honest. "I've seen your work, Ryan. You're the reason this place runs smoothly." Miranda paused. "Also, she looked at you like you'd hung the moon, so there's that." She did not. She absolutely did. The entire room saw it. Ryan unwrapped the sandwich because eating gave him something to do besides address what Miranda was suggesting. "She's my boss." She was being complimentary about an employee she's promoting. "Keep telling yourself that." "Miranda, I'm just saying, the woman looked jealous of flowers, promoted you out of what I'm pretty sure was territorial instinct, and just spent 10 minutes telling a room full of people how exceptional you are. Those are not normal boss behaviors." "She's Victoria Lane. Nothing about her is normal." "True, but that doesn't change what I saw." Miranda stood, brushing crumbs off her skirt. "For what it's worth, I think you'd be good for her. You're calm where she's intense, grounded where she's all ambition, and you see her as a person, not just a title." "I barely know her as a person." "Then maybe it's time you did." She left before Ryan could argue further. He finished his sandwich in silence, trying not to think about Victoria's expression when she'd said, "someone who matters." Trying not to remember the way her control had slipped just for a moment, revealing something underneath that looked almost like loneliness. At 2:15, Ryan began packing up. He'd promised Mia he'd be at the audition, and Mia's promises were the ones he kept no matter what. His phone buzzed as he was shutting down his laptop. "Victoria, have a good afternoon. Tell your daughter good luck." Ryan stared at the message. Victoria never texted him. She called or emailed or just appeared at his desk with demands. Texting was personal, casual. The kind of thing people did when they were friends, not just boss and employee. He typed back, "Thank you? I will." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Victoria, I'd like to meet her sometime, if you're comfortable with that." Ryan's chest tightened. Meeting Mia meant blurring the lines between his carefully separated worlds. Meant letting Victoria into the part of his life he'd protected fiercely from everything work-related. Meant trusting that she saw him as more than just competent. Before he could respond, another message came through. "Victoria. No pressure, just, I should know the people who matter to the people who matter to me." Ryan read it 3 times, then typed, "Maybe sometime." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. And from the way Victoria responded, just a simple good, he thought maybe she understood what that cost him. The drive to Lincoln Elementary took 13 minutes in Friday afternoon traffic. Ryan made it with 8 minutes to spare, enough time to find parking and make his way to the auditorium where parents were gathering in clusters. He recognized a few faces, other single parents he'd exchanged tired smiles with at pickup. A couple of mothers who'd tried to set him up with their single friends before accepting he wasn't interested in dating. Mia spotted him immediately. Her face lit up in that way that still, after 7 years, made every sacrifice worth it. "Daddy, you came!" "Of course I came." Ryan crouched down and pulled her into a hug. "I told you I would." "Some of the other kids' parents didn't come." "Well, I'm not some of the other kids' parents." She squeezed him tighter. Ryan closed his eyes and let himself exist in this moment. Not Chief of Staff Ryan Cole, not the newly visible employee everyone suddenly wanted to talk to. Just Dad. Just the person who showed up when he said he would. The auditions were organized chaos. 27 second graders trying to remember their lines. Parents filming on phones, the drama teacher calling out encouragement while simultaneously preventing disasters. Mia auditioned for the role of a flower in the garden scene, which involved saying exactly 4 lines and standing very still while other kids danced around her. She was perfect, slightly nervous, but perfect. When she finished, she looked directly at Ryan, and he gave her the biggest smile he had. By 4:15, auditions were over, and casting wouldn't be announced until Monday. Ryan collected Mia from the group of kids comparing performances and headed for the car. "How did I do?" she asked as he buckled her seatbelt. "You did amazing. I'm so proud of you. Do you think I'll get to be a flower?" "I think you'll be whatever they need you to be. And you'll be great at it." The drive home was filled with Mia's excited chatter about who else had auditioned and what the costumes might look like, and whether she'd have to wear makeup on stage. Ryan listened, asked questions, let her joy fill the car. At home, they made dinner together, her current favorite, chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, which wasn't fancy but made her happy. They did homework at the kitchen table. They read 3 chapters of their dragon book instead of 2 because she'd done so well at the audition. And by 8:30, Mia was asleep with her stuffed elephant, and the world felt, briefly, manageable. Ryan's phone buzzed as he was cleaning up the kitchen. A text from Daniel. "Dinner next week? I'd love to catch up properly." Ryan stared at the message. Daniel was kind. Daniel was grateful. Daniel was also the reason Ryan's life had become complicated in ways he hadn't signed up for. But Daniel had also been genuinely suffering that night in the parking garage, and Ryan couldn't quite bring himself to resent the flowers when he remembered the raw pain in the man's face. He typed back, "I'll check my schedule and let you know." Another message came through before he could set the phone down. Victoria. "How did the audition go?" Ryan. "She was great. Nervous, but great." Victoria. "I'm sure she was. She has a good father." The words settled into Ryan's chest, warm and unsettling. He didn't know what to do with Victoria Lane being kind about his daughter. Didn't know how to reconcile his fierce, demanding boss with someone who texted to ask about a 7-year-old school play. Ryan. "Thank you." Victoria. "See you Monday, in your new office." Right. Monday. When everything would change, when he'd move from the relative safety of being an assistant to the visibility of being chief of staff, when proximity to Victoria would become his daily reality instead of something he could manage from a desk outside her door. Ryan set his phone down and poured himself a glass of water, drank it slowly, looked around his small apartment, at Mia's drawings on the fridge, at the laundry basket he still needed to fold, at the life he'd built from the wreckage of Claire's death. It was a good life. Simple. Safe. Enough. But standing in his kitchen at 9:00 p.m. on a Friday night, with Victoria's text messages still warm on his phone and a promotion he'd never asked for starting Monday, Ryan wondered if enough was still true. Or if somewhere in the past week, between flowers and jealousy and Victoria looking at him like he mattered, enough had become something he couldn't hide behind anymore. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made everything feel too visible. Ryan stood in his new office, actually his office, with his name on a placard outside the door, and tried to reconcile this space with the desk he'd occupied for 2 years. The office had windows, a door that closed, a view of the city that stretched beyond the parking garage where he'd once found Daniel Mercer falling apart. It was 7:45 a.m. Ryan had arrived early because some habits were too ingrained to break, even when the rules had changed. His new desk was larger, equipped with dual monitors he hadn't requested but apparently needed. The chair was better, everything was better, and somehow that made it all feel more precarious. A knock on the doorframe made him turn. Victoria stood there in a gray suit that probably cost more than Ryan's monthly rent, holding 2 coffee cups. "Thought you might need this," she said, stepping inside and offering him one. "Black, no sugar." Ryan accepted it automatically, too surprised to do anything else. "You made me coffee?" "I'm capable of basic tasks." There was amusement in her voice, but also something else, something almost tentative. "How does it feel?" "The office? Strange." "Strange how?" "Like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." Victoria set her own coffee on his desk and moved to the window, looking out at the view he was still adjusting to. You're not pretending. This is who you've been all along. Now you just have the title to match. It doesn't feel that simple. It never does. She turned back to him, and in the morning light, Ryan noticed the shadows under her eyes. Victoria Lane looked tired in a way he'd never seen before. Can I be honest with you about something? Of course. I didn't just promote you because you're good at your job. I promoted you because… She stopped, seeming to weigh her words carefully. Because I realized I'd been keeping you at a distance.
Professionally and otherwise. And when those flowers arrived, when I saw someone else recognizing what I'd been deliberately not seeing, I panicked. Ryan's heart was beating faster than it should. Panicked how? I made you chief of staff so you'd be close enough that I couldn't ignore you anymore. So I'd have to actually see you every day, not just the work you do. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. That was selfish and manipulative, and I'm sorry. The apology hung between them. Ryan had heard Victoria apologize to clients, to board members, to people whose opinions affected the company's bottom line. He'd never heard her apologize to him. You didn't have to tell me that, he said quietly. Yes, I did. Because I'm asking you to work closely with me, and that requires trust. And trust requires honesty. She met his eyes directly. So I'm being honest. I promoted you partly because you earned it, and partly because I wanted you where I could see you. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if you want to… It doesn't make me uncomfortable. Victoria blinked. It doesn't? It makes me nervous, but not uncomfortable. Ryan set his coffee down, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. I've been invisible for a long time, by choice, because being seen felt dangerous. But maybe being seen by the right person isn't dangerous. Maybe it's just terrifying in a different way. Yes. Something in Victoria's expression softened. Not much. Victoria Lane didn't do soft, but enough that Ryan felt the distance between them shift slightly. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. The seeing people thing, the personal connection thing. I'm very good at running a company. I'm terrible at everything else. You're not terrible. I'm divorced twice over. I haven't spoken to my sister in 3 years. And the closest thing I have to a friend is my yoga instructor who definitely just tolerates me for the paycheck. Victoria's laugh was sharp and self-deprecating. So yes, terrible. Ryan studied her, really studied her, the way she'd been studying him. Saw the loneliness she usually hid behind competence and authority. Saw someone who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten how to let people climb them. You texted me Friday night to ask about my daughter's audition, he said. That's not terrible. That's thoughtful. I Googled what to say when someone's kid has a school event first. You still said it. Victoria smiled, a real smile, small and almost shy. I did. Before Ryan could respond, his phone buzzed, a calendar reminder about the morning leadership meeting. Victoria glanced at her watch and sighed. We should go. Full team meeting in 10 minutes, and they'll want to hear from their new chief of staff. No pressure. Enormous pressure, but you'll be fine. They walked to the conference room together, close enough that Ryan caught that bergamot and cedar scent he associated with Victoria's presence. Other executives were already gathering. Miranda, James, the VP of Product, the General Counsel. People who'd barely noticed Ryan when he was an assistant and were now waiting to see what kind of leader he'd be. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Ryan presented updates on 3 cross-functional initiatives he'd been quietly managing for months, fielded questions about resource allocation and timeline adjustments, and somehow made it through without his voice shaking. Victoria watched him the entire time with an expression that might have been pride or might have been something more complicated. When the meeting ended, Miranda caught Ryan in the hallway. You were great in there, she said. Confident, clear. Like you've been doing this for years. I have been doing this, just without anyone watching. Well, everyone's watching now. She lowered her voice. Including Victoria. Who looked at you like, actually, I'm not even sure what that look was. Impressed? Possessive? Both? Miranda, I know, you don't want to hear it, but Ryan, that woman is falling for you, and I think you might be falling back. Before Ryan could deny it, Before he could even process whether denial was honest, his phone rang. Daniel Mercer's name appeared on the screen. "I should take this," Ryan said, grateful for the escape. Miranda gave him a knowing look and walked away. Ryan answered the call. "Daniel, hi." "Ryan, finally caught you. I've been trying to reach you all weekend." Daniel's voice was warm, enthusiastic. "Did you get my text about dinner?" "I did. Things have been busy with the promotion and—" "Right, the promotion. Congratulations." "I heard through the network. Chief of Staff at Meridian is a big deal." "Thank you." "So, dinner? I really do want to catch up properly. Maybe tomorrow night?" "There's this new Italian place downtown that's supposed to be incredible." Ryan thought about his calendar. Tomorrow was Tuesday. Mia had soccer practice until 6, which meant pickup at 6:15, dinner by 7, homework, bath, bedtime routine. A dinner downtown would require a babysitter he didn't have and couldn't afford, even with the salary increase that hadn't kicked in yet. "I can't do evenings," Ryan said. "I have my daughter." "Oh, right." Daniel paused. "Lunch then? Wednesday?" Lunch was safer. Lunch didn't disrupt Mia's schedule. Lunch was a clear boundary between work and home that Ryan could maintain. Wednesday lunch works. Perfect. I'll text you the address. Ryan, I'm really glad we're doing this. That night in the parking garage, you have no idea how much you helped me. I'd like to return the favor if I can. The call ended before Ryan could explain that he didn't need favors, hadn't been looking for gratitude, had simply done what anyone with basic human decency would do. But Daniel's earnestness was hard to resent, even when it complicated things. Ryan returned to his office to find Victoria waiting inside, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Was that Daniel Mercer?" "Yes." "What did he want?" "Lunch, Wednesday." Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You're having lunch with him." "He wants to say thank you, properly." "He's already said thank you, with approximately 6 dozen roses." Ryan couldn't help it. He laughed. The jealousy was so obvious, so at odds with Victoria's usual composure, that it was almost endearing. "Are you seriously angry about lunch?" "I'm not angry." "You look angry." "I'm not—" Victoria stopped, took a breath. "I'm being irrational. You can have lunch with whoever you want. It's none of my business." "But you wish it was your business." The words came out before Ryan could stop them. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, and he realized he'd just said the quiet part out loud. Had just acknowledged that there was something happening between them that went beyond boss and employee, beyond professional respect, into territory neither of them knew how to navigate. "Yes," Victoria said quietly. "I wish it was my business, but I also know I have no right to wish that. You don't report to me anymore, but there's still a power imbalance. I'm still the CEO. You're still what? Still someone I could hurt if I'm not careful. Someone with a daughter depending on you keeping this job. Someone who can't afford for me to be selfish about what I want." The honesty in her voice was startling. Ryan had never heard Victoria talk about wanting something she couldn't have, admitting to desires that conflicted with logic. It made her seem human in ways that were dangerous to his carefully maintained boundaries. "What do you want?" Ryan heard himself ask. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she moved closer, close enough that Ryan could see the exact shade of gray in her eyes, could smell bergamot and cedar, could feel the tension radiating off her in waves. "I want to know everything about you," she said. "I want to meet your daughter. I want to understand what it's like being a single father working 70 hours a week. I want to know what made you stop in that parking garage for Daniel Mercer. I want to know what you're afraid of and what you hope for and what you look like when you're not being professionally competent." Ryan's breath caught. "Victoria. But I also know that wanting those things is complicated. Because I'm your boss. Because you need this job. Because acting on what I want could destroy something you've built for your daughter." She stepped back deliberately. "So I'm telling you what I want, and then I'm going to leave it alone. Because the power to decide what happens next has to be yours, not mine." Before Ryan could respond, before he could process the fact that Victoria Lane had just made herself completely vulnerable, she walked out of his office. Ryan stood there for a long moment, heart racing, mind spinning.
Then he sat down at his new desk in his new office and tried to remember how to breathe. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of meetings and emails and people adjusting to the fact that Ryan Cole was now someone whose opinion mattered. By 5:30, his brain felt like it had been running a marathon. By 6, he was in the car heading to pickup, grateful for the forced shift from chief of staff mode back to dad mode. Mia was waiting with big news. "I got the part," she announced the moment Ryan walked into the after-school care room. "I'm a flower. Mrs. Rodriguez posted the cast list, and I'm flower number 3. Ryan scooped her up, despite the fact that she was getting too big for scooping. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. We have rehearsals every Thursday after school, and the show is in 3 weeks, and I need a costume and... Daddy, are you okay?" Ryan realized he was holding her too tight, pressing his face into her hair, using her solid reality to ground himself after a day that had felt increasingly surreal. "I'm great. Just really happy for you." They celebrated with ice cream for dinner, just this once, because she'd gotten the part and Ryan needed something simple and happy after Victoria's confession. Mia talked nonstop about the play, about her lines, about how flower number 3 was actually a very important role because she stood in the front. After homework and bath and bedtime stories, after Mia was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "I shouldn't have said what I said. I'm sorry if I made things awkward." Ryan stared at the message. He could let her walk it back, could pretend the conversation never happened, could maintain the professional distance that kept everything safe and uncomplicated. Instead, he typed, "You didn't make things awkward. You made things honest." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Victoria. "Honest is terrifying." Ryan. "Yes." Victoria. "But maybe necessary." Ryan. "Maybe." A pause. Then, Victoria. "How did your daughter's audition result go?" The subject change was deliberate, a step back from intensity into something safer. Ryan accepted it gratefully. Ryan. "She got the part. Flower number 3. She's very excited." Victoria. "Flower number 3 sounds like a crucial role." Ryan. "According to her, it's the most important flower." Victoria. "Of course it is. When's the performance?" Ryan. 3 weeks, Thursday night." Another pause. Longer this time. Victoria. "I'd like to come, if that's okay." Ryan read the message 3 times. Victoria wanted to come to Mia's school play, wanted to step into that part of his life he'd kept separate from everything work-related, wanted to meet his daughter, not as his boss, but as... what? What were they? Ryan. "That would be okay." Victoria. "Good, thank you." Ryan set his phone down and leaned back against the couch. 3 weeks until Victoria Lane sat in an elementary school auditorium and watched his daughter play flower number 3. 3 weeks to figure out what it meant that his boss had admitted she wanted to know everything about him. 3 weeks to decide if being seen by Victoria was the terrifying mistake he'd always feared or something else entirely. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in the controlled chaos of settling into his new role. Ryan discovered that being chief of staff meant attending meetings he'd only heard about before, making decisions that affected entire departments, and being consulted on strategy he'd previously just executed. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Wednesday at noon, he met Daniel Mercer at the Italian restaurant downtown. Daniel was already there when Ryan arrived, looking healthier than he had in that parking garage, more put together. "Ryan, thanks for coming." Daniel stood to shake his hand, genuine warmth in his expression. "You look good. The promotion suits you." "Thanks." Ryan sat down, accepted the menu the waiter handed him. "You look better too, than last time." "I am better, significantly." Daniel's smile faded into something more serious. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. That night, when you found me, I was in a really dark place. My marriage had just ended, I'd lost custody of my kids, and I was sitting in my car seriously considering whether I wanted to keep existing." Ryan's chest tightened. "Daniel, you stopped me. Not because you had to, not because you knew me. You stopped because you saw someone suffering and you cared enough to ask if I was okay. And then you listened, really listened.
Like my pain mattered. Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. I need you to understand. You saved my life that night. Literally. And the flowers, the lunch, none of it is enough to actually thank you for that. Ryan didn't know what to say. He'd known the conversation was important to Daniel, but he hadn't understood the full weight of it, hadn't realized how close to the edge Daniel had been. I'm glad you're still here, Ryan said finally. I'm glad you're doing better. I am. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm rebuilding my relationship with my kids. I'm actually dealing with things instead of just drowning in them. Daniel paused. And I wanted you to know that. Wanted you to see that what you did mattered. They ordered lunch. Daniel talked about his life, the divorce settlement, his kids' upcoming visits, the therapy that was helping him understand patterns he'd been repeating for years. Ryan listened the way he'd listened that night in the parking garage, present and focused, giving Daniel the space to process what he needed to process. Can I ask you something? Daniel said as they were finishing dessert. That night, you mentioned you understood what it felt like when your family was rearranged. What did you mean? Ryan hesitated. He didn't talk about Claire often, didn't share that part of his life with people who didn't need to know. But Daniel had just trusted him with something profound, and reciprocity felt important. My wife died 3 years ago, Ryan said quietly. Cancer. We had a daughter who was 4 at the time. And suddenly I was a single parent trying to figure out how to work full-time and raise a child and not completely fall apart. Daniel's face filled with understanding and sympathy. I'm so sorry, I can't imagine. You adjust, not because you want to, because you have to. Ryan picked at the remnants of his tiramisu. But yeah, I understood what it felt like when everything you thought your life would be just isn't. Is it getting easier? Some days. Other days I'm still just surviving. Ryan looked up, met Daniel's eyes. But surviving counts. That's what I was trying to tell you that night. Even when it doesn't feel like enough, surviving counts. Daniel nodded slowly. Thank you. For then and for now. They split the check despite Daniel's protests, and Ryan was back in the office by 1:30. He was heading to his office when he saw Victoria standing by his door, waiting. How was lunch? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Good. Heavy, but good. Heavy how? Ryan glanced around. The hallway was empty, but this didn't feel like a conversation for public space. Can we talk in my office? Victoria followed him inside. Ryan closed the door and turned to find her watching him with that intense focus that made him feel simultaneously seen and exposed. Daniel was in a worse place than I realized, Ryan said. That night I found him, it was really bad. And I guess I helped more than I knew. You saved him. He said that. I don't know if it's true. Why wouldn't it be true? Because I just listened. Anyone could have listened. But no one else did. You did. Victoria moved closer. You have this way of seeing people, really seeing them. Not their title or their use to you, just them. Do you know how rare that is? Ryan shook his head. It's not rare, it's just being decent. It's rare, Victoria insisted. I've spent 20 years in business, Ryan. Most people look at you and see what you can do for them. You look at people and see what they need. That's different. She stopped abruptly, like she'd been about to say something revealing and caught herself. Ryan waited. That's why I can't stop thinking about you, Victoria finished quietly. Because you see me, not the CEO, not the impossible demanding boss, just me. And I haven't been seen like that in longer than I can remember. The confession hung in the air between them. Ryan's heart was racing again, that dangerous combination of fear and want making it hard to think clearly. Victoria, A knock on the door interrupted him. Miranda's voice came through. Ryan? Sorry to interrupt, but we need you in the product meeting. Crisis with the development timeline. Ryan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Be right there. Victoria's expression shifted back to professional neutrality, but something lingered in her eyes. We should talk, really talk, not in stolen moments between meetings. When? Friday? After work? We could get dinner. Somewhere quiet where we can actually discuss what's happening here. Dinner. Friday night.
Ryan thought about Mia, about the babysitter he'd need, about stepping deliberately into something that felt increasingly inevitable and increasingly terrifying. Okay, Asas, he heard himself say. Friday. Victoria nodded. Friday. They left his office together, returning to their roles, CEO and chief of staff, boss and employee, two professionals who definitely weren't falling for each other despite all evidence to the contrary. The product meeting lasted 2 hours. The crisis was resolved through a combination of Ryan's organizational skills and Victoria's decisive leadership. By the time it ended, it was past 6, and Ryan was late for pickup. He texted Miranda to cover a meeting tomorrow morning and drove too fast to Bright Horizons, where Mia was the last kid waiting. The guilt was immediate and familiar. Sorry, sweetheart. Meeting ran late. It's okay. Mia took his hand. Mrs. Chen let me help clean up the art supplies.
In the car, she talked about rehearsal. They'd started blocking the first scene, and flower number 3 had to stand very still while the sun character danced. Ryan listened, let her voice push away thoughts of Victoria and dinner and the conversation they'd been building toward for days. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ryan sat on his couch and thought about Friday, about what dinner with Victoria would mean, about whether he was ready to blur the lines between his carefully separated worlds. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. If Friday is too complicated with your daughter, we can postpone. No pressure. Ryan appreciated that she was thinking about Mia, appreciated that she understood his life didn't allow for spontaneous evening plans, but he also knew that postponing was just delaying something that needed to happen. Ryan, Friday is fine, I'll figure it out. Victoria, are you sure? Ryan, yes. He wasn't sure, not even close. But sometimes being sure wasn't the point. Sometimes you just had to step forward and trust that the ground would hold. Finding a babysitter turned out to be harder than Ryan expected. His usual backup, Mrs. Chen from after-school care, was visiting her daughter in Portland. The other parents he knew well enough to ask were either unavailable or required explanations about why he needed Friday evening free, and Ryan wasn't ready to explain Victoria Lane to anyone yet. By Thursday afternoon, he was considering canceling. Then Miranda appeared at his office door with a solution he hadn't anticipated. I'll watch her, she said, leaning against the doorframe with the casual confidence of someone who'd already decided this was happening. Ryan looked up from his laptop. Watch who? Your daughter, Friday night. I heard you on the phone earlier trying to find childcare, and I'm offering. Miranda, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. My son would love a play date, and you need an evening without logistics. She smiled. Plus, I'm guessing this is about dinner with Victoria, and that's definitely something you shouldn't cancel. Ryan felt heat creep up his neck. I never said it was Victoria. You didn't have to. She's been different all week, distracted, almost nervous, which is not a word I've ever associated with Victoria Lane. Miranda moved into the office and closed the door. Ryan, I've known her for 4 years. I've never seen her like this. Whatever's happening between you two, it matters. It's just dinner, to talk, professionally. Keep telling yourself that. Miranda pulled out her phone. Text me your address. I'll pick up Mia from after-school care at 6. She and Jason can have pizza and play video games until you get home, which should not be early, by the way. Take your time. Actually have a conversation. Ryan wanted to argue. Wanted to maintain the fiction that this was simple and professional and definitely not terrifying, but Miranda's expression was both knowing and kind, and arguing would have required energy he didn't have. Thank you, he said instead. Really? You're welcome. Now stop looking panicked and go back to whatever you were doing. Friday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Ryan went through his morning routine with Mia, breakfast, lunch packing, the now perfect braid, while trying not to think about evening. At work, he moved through meetings and decisions with the same competence he'd brought to everything, but his mind kept drifting to 7 o'clock, to dinner, to Victoria. She'd been professional all week, polite, careful to maintain appropriate distance in front of others. But Ryan had caught her looking at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention, had felt the tension in the air whenever they were alone in his office, had noticed the way she found excuses to stop by and ask questions that weren't really about work. At 4:30, Victoria appeared at his door. Still good for tonight? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Yes. Miranda's watching Mia. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. That's kind of her. She said you've been distracted all week. Miranda talks too much. She said you've never been like this before. Victoria stepped fully into his office and closed the door. I haven't. That should probably concern you. Should it? I don't know how to do this, Ryan. The personal thing. I'm 38 years old and I've let exactly 3 people get close enough to actually matter. I married 2 of them and managed to ruin both relationships through sheer inability to be vulnerable. The third is my business partner who moved to Singapore to get away from me. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was reading from a resume of failures. So yes, the fact that I'm attempting this should probably concern you. Ryan studied her. The perfectly tailored suit, the careful posture, the control that was starting to show cracks. You're here anyway. I'm here anyway. Why? Because for the first time in longer than I can remember, I met someone who makes me want to try, who makes the risk feel worth it. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. And that's terrifying, but apparently not terrifying enough to make me walk away. Before Ryan could respond, his phone buzzed, a reminder about the leadership call in 5 minutes. Victoria glanced at her watch and sighed. We should go, but tonight we actually talk. Tonight we actually talk, Ryan agreed. The rest of the afternoon passed in controlled chaos. By 6, Ryan was heading home to change and drop Mia with Miranda. By 6:30, he was standing in his apartment trying to decide if he was dressed appropriately for dinner with his boss, who'd admitted she was falling for him. His phone buzzed, a text from Miranda with a photo of Mia and Jason already deep into video games, both kids grinning at the screen. Miranda: We're good here. Take your time. And Ryan? Breathe. Ryan smiled despite his nerves and texted back his thanks. At 6:45, he left the apartment and drove to the restaurant Victoria had chosen, a quiet place in the Arts District, the kind of spot where CEOs went when they wanted privacy more than scene-making. Victoria was already there, seated at a corner table that offered maximum discretion. She'd changed out of her work suit into dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that made her look younger, softer, almost approachable. Ryan's heart did something complicated in his chest. Hi, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. Hi. Victoria smiled, and it was genuine, nervous. You look nice. So do you. They ordered wine, made small talk about the week, about work things that felt safe. The waiter brought bread, took their dinner orders, left them alone again. And suddenly the safety of professional distance was gone, and they were just 2 people sitting across from each other trying to figure out what they were doing. I need to tell you something, Victoria said, setting down her wine glass. About why I'm the way I am. About why this is hard for me. Ryan waited, giving her space. I grew up poor, like welfare and food stamps and shoes from Goodwill Poor. My mother worked 3 jobs. My father left when I was 6. Victoria's voice was steady, but her eyes were distant, focused on memories Ryan couldn't see. I learned very early that the only person I could depend on was myself. That vulnerability was dangerous. That caring about people meant they could hurt you. That's a hard lesson for a kid. It was necessary. I got myself through school, through college, through business school, built this career through sheer force of will and refusal to let anyone see weakness. She looked at him directly now. And it worked. I'm successful, financially secure, respected in my field, but I'm also alone, because somewhere along the way, I forgot how to let people in. Ryan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. The touch was deliberate, an acknowledgement that he heard what she wasn't quite saying. Victoria's fingers tightened around his. My turn, Ryan said quietly. Claire, my wife, died 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Diagnosed stage 4, gone in 8 months. And those 8 months were hell. Watching someone you love deteriorate. Trying to keep things normal for a 4-year-old who didn't understand why mommy was always sick. Planning a funeral while your wife was still alive. Victoria's grip on his hand tightened further. After she died, I had to figure out how to be a single parent while grieving, how to work enough to keep us financially stable while being present enough that Mia didn't feel abandoned, how to be enough when I felt like I was barely surviving. Ryan's voice was rough now, and I learned to be small, to not ask for help, to stay invisible so no one would see how close I was to falling apart. You're not falling apart now. No. But I'm also terrified that if I let someone in again, if I care about someone again, I'll lose them too. And I don't know if I can survive that twice. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Their food arrived and they ate slowly, talking around the heavy things they'd just shared. Victoria told him about her failed marriages. One to a man who wanted a wife who stayed home, one to a woman who wanted someone less consumed by work. Ryan told her about the early days after Claire's death, about learning to braid hair from YouTube videos, about the night Mia asked if he was going to die too, and he'd had to promise something he couldn't guarantee. By the time dessert arrived, they'd moved into easier territory. Victoria talked about growing up in Pittsburgh, about the scholarship that got her out, about the first time she realized she was good at business. Ryan talked about college, about meeting Claire, about the ordinary happy years before cancer made everything complicated. What was she like? Victoria asked. Claire? Ryan appreciated that she asked, appreciated that she wasn't threatened by the ghost of his late wife. Kind, patient, better at the parenting thing than I am. She loved gardening, had this whole elaborate vegetable garden in our old house, used to make Mia help plant things and explain how seeds worked. He smiled at the memory. When she got sick, she made me promise I'd keep the garden going. I tried for a year, but everything died. Turns out, I don't have her gift. You have other gifts. Like what? You show up. You do the hard things even when you're exhausted. You see people. You care even when it costs you something. Victoria's voice was soft. Those aren't small gifts, Ryan. The restaurant was starting to empty around them. Ryan glanced at his watch, 9:30. Later than he'd intended, but Miranda had said to take his time. I should probably get back soon, he said reluctantly. Mia's not used to me being gone this late. Can I ask you something first? Victoria's expression was serious now, vulnerable. What are we doing here? Because I need to know if I'm reading this wrong. If you're just being kind because I'm your boss and you're not reading it wrong. I'm not? No. Ryan met her eyes directly. I'm terrified of what this could become, of what it would mean for my job if it doesn't work out, of letting someone matter when I've spent 3 years making sure no one matters too much. But I'm here, and that means something. Victoria exhaled slowly. Okay, so we're, what? Trying this? Carefully, slowly, with a lot of communication about boundaries and what this means for work. Ryan paused, and with the understanding that Mia comes first, always, no matter what. I wouldn't expect anything else. Victoria signaled for the check. I should tell you something, though, about the promotion, about moving you to chief of staff. What about it? I'm having HR restructure the reporting lines. You'll still be chief of staff, but you'll report to the board, not directly to me. She said it quickly, like she'd been planning this. I realized I was putting you in an impossible position. If there's a we at all, I can't also be your direct supervisor. It's not fair to you. Ryan stared at her. You're restructuring the company because of us? I'm restructuring the company because the power dynamic isn't equal, and I won't let you feel trapped by that. If this doesn't work, if you decide I'm not worth the risk, I need you to be able to walk away without fear. Victoria's expression was fierce. You matter too much for me to let power be the reason you stay. Something in Ryan's chest cracked open. The gesture was extraordinary. Victoria Lane restructuring her own company to remove the imbalance between them. Not because she had to, but because she wanted him to be free to choose. When does the restructuring happen? He asked. Monday. I'm announcing it to the board this weekend. That's fast. I don't do things halfway. If we're doing this, I'm doing it right. Victoria stood, and Ryan stood with her. Outside the restaurant, the October evening was cool and clear. They walked to the parking lot slowly, neither quite ready for the evening to end. I had a good time tonight, Victoria said when they reached her car. Even the heavy parts. So did I. Can we do it again? Soon? Yes,
But next time somewhere with less pressure, maybe coffee, daytime? Victoria smiled. Coffee sounds perfect. They stood there for a moment longer, close enough that Ryan could smell bergamot and cedar, could see the vulnerability Victoria was trying not to hide. She looked like she was going to say something, then changed her mind. What? Ryan asked. I was going to kiss you, then I remembered we're taking this slowly and I shouldn't push. Ryan's heart was racing again. Slowly doesn't mean never. No? No. Victoria moved closer, giving him time to step back if he wanted. Ryan didn't step back. When she kissed him, it was gentle, questioning, careful, nothing like the intensity he'd expected. Just a soft press of lips that lasted maybe 3 seconds and somehow felt like the most significant thing that had happened all night. When she pulled away, Victoria was smiling. Slowly. Slowly, Ryan agreed, even though his heart was beating fast enough to make slowly feel impossible. They said goodnight. Ryan drove home with his mind spinning, pulled into his apartment complex at 10:15, and found Miranda's car still in the visitor spot. Inside, both kids were asleep on the couch. The video game paused mid-level. Hey, Miranda said quietly from the kitchen. How was it? Good. Really good. You're smiling. I don't think I've ever seen you smile like that. Ryan touched his lips self-consciously. That obvious? That obvious, but in a good way. Miranda grabbed her bag. Mia was great, by the way. They played for hours. She's a sweet kid. Thank you for doing this, really. Any time. I mean that. Miranda paused at the door. Ryan, whatever's happening with Victoria, I think it's good for both of you. She needs someone who sees her as human, and you need someone who sees how extraordinary you are. After Miranda left, Ryan carried Mia to her bed without waking her, tucked her in with her stuffed elephant, and stood in her doorway for a long moment just watching her sleep. This was what mattered, this small person who depended on him. Everything else, Victoria, the promotion, the complications of feeling something for someone again, all of it was secondary to making sure Mia was safe and loved and okay. But standing there in the quiet apartment, Ryan could still feel Victoria's kiss, could still hear her voice saying she wanted to try. And for the first time in 3 years, the future felt like something other than just survival. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. Thank you for tonight. For being honest. For giving this a chance. Ryan typed back, thank you for seeing me. Victoria. Always. The word settled into Ryan's chest, warm and terrifying and hopeful. Always. Like a promise. Like something that could last longer than tonight. Ryan plugged his phone into charge and got ready for bed. Tomorrow was Saturday. Mia's soccer game in the morning, grocery shopping in the afternoon. The normal weekend rhythms that structured their lives. But Monday would bring the restructuring announcement. Monday would make it official that he and Victoria were trying something careful and complicated and potentially wonderful. He fell asleep thinking about bergamot and cedar, about Victoria's smile, about the way carefully built walls could come down when the right person was patient enough to wait. Saturday morning arrived with Mia bouncing on his bed at 7:30, full of energy about the soccer game. They made pancakes together, her standing on a stool to help flip them, and Ryan felt the normalcy of it settle something that last night had shaken loose. Daddy, you're happy, Mia observed, pouring syrup with the concentrated focus of someone taking this task very seriously. I am happy. Is that weird? No, just different. You're usually tired happy. Now you're real happy. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds, Ryan pulled her into a hug. You're right. I am real happy. The soccer game was chaotic. 12 second graders chasing a ball with more enthusiasm than skill, parents cheering from the sidelines, coaches trying to maintain some semblance of strategy. Mia scored once, looked directly at Ryan in the stands, and grinned so wide it made his chest hurt with how much he loved her. After the game, they stopped for smoothies. Then grocery shopping, Mia helping push the cart and occasionally sneaking items in when she thought he wasn't looking. Normal Saturday things that felt more manageable than they had in months. At home, while Mia was absorbed in coloring, Ryan's phone rang. Victoria. Hi, he answered, already smiling. Hi, is this a bad time? No, it's good. Mia's occupied. What's up? I just got off a call with the board chair. The restructuring is approved.
Monday morning, you'll officially report to the board instead of me. Victoria paused. I wanted you to know before it's announced. That was fast. I told you, I don't do halfway. He could hear the smile in her voice. How was your morning? Soccer game. Mia scored a goal. Very exciting. I wish I could have seen it. The casual statement hit Ryan harder than expected. Victoria wishing she could have been there for a kid's soccer game, wanting to be part of the ordinary moments that made up his life. It felt significant in ways he was still processing. Maybe next time, he found himself saying. I'd like that. They talked for 20 more minutes, easy conversation about nothing important, the kind of talk that felt like getting to know someone beyond job titles and professional competence. Victoria asked about Mia's play rehearsals. Ryan asked about Victoria's weekend plans. It was normal and comfortable and terrifying in its intimacy. After they hung up, Ryan sat on his couch and let himself think about what was happening. He was falling for Victoria Lane. Despite the complications, despite the risks, despite 3 years of carefully avoiding exactly this kind of vulnerability, he was falling, and he wasn't sure he wanted to stop. Sunday passed quietly, laundry, homework help, a movie with Mia curled against his side. Normal things that felt different with Victoria's presence now woven into the edges of his thoughts. They texted periodically throughout the day, nothing significant, just small check-ins that felt like building something steady. Monday morning arrived with the announcement. Victoria sent the company-wide email at 8, explaining the restructuring as a strategic decision to strengthen executive governance. Ryan's new reporting structure was presented as part of broader organizational maturity. Professional, clean, giving nothing away about the real reason. Miranda appeared at Ryan's office door at 8:47 with coffee and a knowing smile. Interesting restructuring, she said, setting the cup on his desk. Very strategic. And I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that you came back from dinner Friday looking like you discovered something worth risking everything for. Ryan didn't deny it, couldn't deny it, really, when Miranda saw through him so clearly. It's complicated. The good things usually are. Miranda sat down, getting comfortable. Can I give you some advice, as someone who's known Victoria longer than you have? Please. She's going to push you away. Not because she doesn't care, but because she does. When things get real, when she starts feeling too much, she'll sabotage it. It's what she does. She'll pick fights or suddenly be unavailable or find reasons why this can't work. Miranda's expression was serious now. But if you can get through that, if you can stay steady when she's spiraling, she's worth it. She's loyal and brilliant and surprisingly tender under all that control. You just have to be patient enough to see it. How do you know she'll push me away? Because I've seen her do it before. With her ex-wife. With friendships. With anything that makes her vulnerable. Miranda stood. I'm telling you this because I think you're good for her. And I think she's good for you. But it's not going to be easy. After Miranda left, Ryan sat with that warning. Victoria would push him away. Would test whether he meant it when he said he was willing to try. The knowledge should have made him reconsider. Should have made him protect himself better. Instead, it just made him more determined to stay. His phone buzzed. Victoria, can you come to my office? Something I want to show you. Ryan made his way to Victoria's office. Still her office. Still that glass-walled space that broadcast authority. She was standing by her window again, but this time she turned when he entered, and her expression was soft. Close the door. He did. Victoria moved to her desk and pulled something from her drawer, a single white rose in a simple glass vase. I wanted to give you this, she said. Not a grand gesture like Daniel's dozens, just one rose. To say I see you. And I'm grateful you're letting me try. Ryan took the vase, touched by the simplicity of it. The deliberate contrast to the overwhelming arrangements that had started all of this. One rose, intentional, chosen, just for him. Thank you, he said quietly. You're welcome. Victoria stepped closer. We're really doing this. We're really doing this. It's terrifying, yes. But also wonderful, Ryan finished.
Victoria smiled, and in that moment, standing in her office with a white rose between them and the whole complicated future ahead, Ryan let himself hope. Let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, being seen by the right person wasn't dangerous at all. Maybe it was exactly what he'd needed all along. The white rose sat on Ryan's desk for 3 days before Victoria started pulling away. It was subtle at first, canceled coffee plans because of an urgent board call, shorter text messages, a certain distance in her eyes during the leadership meetings where they were both present but carefully professional. Ryan recognized the pattern from what Miranda had warned him about, recognized it from his own tendency to protect himself by retreating. On Thursday afternoon, 1 week after the restructuring announcement, Victoria asked him to come to her office. Her expression was controlled in a way that made Ryan's chest tighten with anticipation of something he didn't want to hear. "Close the door," she said, and he did. "We need to talk about this," Victoria said without preamble. "About us. About whether this is actually viable." Ryan leaned against the closed door, studying her. "What changed?" "Nothing changed. That's the problem. I keep waiting for this to feel like a mistake, and it doesn't. And that's worse somehow." "How is that worse?" Victoria moved to her window, that familiar position that meant she was struggling with something. "Because if it doesn't feel like a mistake now, then when it falls apart, and it will fall apart, Ryan, because I'm fundamentally bad at this, it's going to hurt more. For both of us. You're trying to end this before it really starts." "I'm trying to be realistic." Ryan moved closer, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders, the fear she was trying to hide behind logic. "You're trying to protect yourself. There's a difference. Same outcome. Not if I don't let you push me away." Victoria turned, and her eyes were fierce with something that looked like desperation. "You should let me push you away. You have a daughter, a career, a life that works. I'm going to mess that up. I mess everything up eventually. Ask my ex-wives. Ask my former business partner. Ask anyone who's tried to get close to me. I'm not them. That doesn't mean you're immune to my particular brand of dysfunction." Ryan took another step closer. "What are you actually afraid of?" "I'm afraid I'm going to fall in love with you." Victoria said it like a confession, raw and honest. "I'm afraid I'm already falling, and when I love people, I hurt them. I get too consumed with work. I forget to show up. I choose the company over the person every single time because that's what I know how to do. And you deserve someone who will choose you, who will choose your daughter, someone better at the human parts of life." "You brought me a white rose," Ryan said quietly. "You restructured the entire company so I could choose freely. You asked about Mia's soccer game and her play rehearsals. You're showing up, Victoria. You're trying. That counts. For now. But what about 6 months from now? A year? When the novelty wears off and I revert to being the person who works until 11 and sends emails on Christmas? Then I'll remind you that I'm still here, that Mia's still here, that relationships require maintenance, and I'm willing to do the work if you are." Victoria shook her head. "You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's hard. Probably the hardest thing either of us will do. But hard doesn't mean impossible. What if I can't do it? What if I try and still fail? Then we'll deal with it. Together. Like adults who care about each other." Ryan closed the remaining distance between them. "But you don't get to make that decision alone. You don't get to decide I'm better off without you when I'm standing here saying I want to try. I could hurt you." "You could. I could hurt you too. That's the risk we take when we let people matter." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and Ryan could see the battle happening behind her eyes. Fear versus hope, control versus surrender. The familiar safety of isolation versus the terrifying possibility of connection. "I don't know how to do this," she said finally, and her voice was smaller than he'd ever heard it. "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." "What if Victoria?" Ryan took her hand, felt her fingers tremble slightly in his. "Stop catastrophizing. Stop trying to predict every way this could fail. Just be here. Now. With me." She nodded slowly. "Okay. I can try that. That's all I'm asking." They stood there for a moment, hands linked, the tension gradually easing from Victoria's shoulders. Then her phone rang, the board chair based on the caller ID, and reality reasserted itself.
Victoria answered, shifting back into CEO mode with practiced ease, but her eyes stayed on Ryan even as she talked through quarterly projections. When the call ended, she squeezed his hand once before letting go. Thank you for not letting me sabotage this. Miranda warned me you would try. Miranda knows me too well. Victoria smiled, and it was genuine. I'm still terrified. Me too. But we're doing this anyway. We're doing this anyway. Ryan left her office feeling like they'd crossed some threshold, had weathered the first real test of whatever they were building. The white rose was still on his desk when he got back, a reminder that some gestures mattered more than grand displays. The next few days settled into a rhythm. Work during the day, carefully professional. Text messages in the evening, increasingly comfortable. One lunch together at the quiet cafe near the office, where they talked about everything except work and discovered they both hated cilantro and loved old movie soundtracks and had complicated relationships with their families. Thursday evening, the night of Mia's play, arrived with Ryan's nerves stretched tight. Not because of the play. Mia had been practicing her lines until she could say them in her sleep, but because Victoria was coming. Would see him as a father. Would meet Mia. Would step fully into the part of his life he'd kept separate from everything else. Ryan arrived at Lincoln Elementary 40 minutes early, helped set up chairs in the auditorium, and found a seat that offered a good view of the stage. Other parents filtered in, the air filling with that particular energy of elementary school events. Excitement, exhaustion, phones ready to record every moment. Victoria arrived at 6:50, 10 minutes before curtain. She was dressed casually, dark jeans, a simple sweater, her hair down in a way Ryan had never seen at work. She looked nervous. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat beside him. "How you made it?" "I said I would." Victoria glanced around the auditorium, taking in the construction paper decorations and the slightly chaotic backstage area visible through the curtain gaps. This is really different from board meetings." Ryan smiled. "Welcome to the other part of my life." "I'm honored to be here." Before Ryan could respond, the lights dimmed and the principal walked onto the stage to introduce the performance. The play was exactly what elementary school plays were. Earnest, slightly chaotic, filled with kids who occasionally forgot their lines or waved at their parents mid-scene. Mia appeared in the second act as flower number 3, standing very still in her construction paper petals, while the sun character danced around the garden. Ryan watched her with the pride that never got old, no matter how many school events he attended. But he was also acutely aware of Victoria beside him, leaning forward slightly, completely focused on the stage. When Mia delivered her lines, 4 sentences about how flowers need sun and water to grow, Victoria smiled like she was watching something genuinely delightful. The play ended with enthusiastic applause. Kids took their bows, teachers thanked the parents, and then the audience was released to find their young performers. Ryan made his way backstage, Victoria following at a respectful distance. Mia spotted him immediately and ran over, still wearing her flower costume. "Daddy, did you see me? Did I do good?" "You did amazing." Ryan crouched down and pulled her into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." "I didn't forget any of my lines. Not even one." Mia pulled back and her eyes landed on Victoria standing a few feet away. "Who's that?" Ryan's heart rate kicked up. This was the moment. The introduction that would make everything real in ways that dinner dates and text messages hadn't quite managed. "Mia, this is Victoria. She's my friend from work." "Victoria, this is my daughter, Mia." Victoria stepped forward, and Ryan watched her consciously soften her usual intensity. "Hi, Mia. Your dad's told me a lot about you, and you were wonderful as flower number 3. Mia studied Victoria with the unfiltered assessment that only children managed. "You're pretty." "Thank you. So are you." "I really like your costume." "I helped make it. We used green paper and tape." And Mia launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the costume construction process, and Ryan watched Victoria listen with genuine attention, asking questions that showed she was actually interested, not just being polite. After a few minutes, another child called Mia's name, and she ran off to compare performances with her friends. Victoria turned to Ryan, and her expression was soft. "She's incredible." "She is." "You're an amazing father." The words hit Ryan in a place that was still raw from 3 years of wondering if he was doing enough, being enough, giving Mia everything she needed despite the gaping absence of her mother. Thank you. I mean it. The way she looks at you. That's trust. That's safety. You've given her something really valuable. They drove separately back to Ryan's apartment, Victoria following in her car, Ryan with Mia chattering the entire drive about the play and her friends and how she was definitely going to be in next year's play too. At the apartment, Mia was wired from the performance, too excited for immediate bedtime. Can Victoria stay? Mia asked while Ryan was making her a snack. Just for a little bit? Ryan glanced at Victoria, who looked both pleased and uncertain. If that's okay with her? I'd love to stay, Victoria said. If you're sure. They ended up on the couch, Ryan and Victoria on opposite ends, Mia between them, showing Victoria her collection of drawings and explaining each one in detail. Victoria asked questions, made appropriate impressed noises, and treated Mia's artwork with the same seriousness she brought to quarterly reports. By 9:30, Mia was yawning between sentences. Ryan carried her to bed, went through their routine, teeth brushing, pajamas, the dragon book they were still working through. When he came back to the living room, Victoria was still on the couch, looking at a drawing Mia had made of their apartment. She drew you at your desk, Victoria said, pointing to a stick figure with a computer. Even in her pictures, you're working. Ryan sat down beside her, closer than before. That's what she sees most. Is that hard, knowing she sees you that way? Sometimes, but she also drew herself right next to me, so at least I'm working while being present. Victoria set the drawing down carefully. She's easy to love. She is. I can see why you protect her so fiercely, why you were so careful about letting anyone into this part of your life. Ryan turned to face Victoria fully. You're here now. I'm here now, Victoria agreed, and I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to disappoint her, disappoint you. You showed up tonight. You listened to her talk about her costume for 10 minutes. You looked at every single drawing like it mattered. That's not messing up, Victoria. That's trying. What if trying isn't enough? Then we figure out what else we need, but you don't get to decide you failed before you've really started. Victoria leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder in a gesture that was surprisingly vulnerable. I really like you. Both of you. And that's terrifying. Ryan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. I really like you too. And yes, it's terrifying. But maybe that's okay. They sat like that for a while, comfortable in the quiet apartment with Mia asleep down the hall, and the future still uncertain, but feeling more possible than it had before. Eventually, Victoria pulled back, and her expression was more settled. I should go. It's late, and you have work tomorrow. So do you. Yes, but I don't have a 7-year-old who will be up at the crack of dawn. Ryan walked her to the door. In the hallway, Victoria paused and turned back to him. Thank you for letting me be here tonight, for trusting me with this part of your life. Thank you for showing up. Victoria kissed him, soft and brief and sweet, then pulled back before it could deepen into something more. Slowly, she reminded him. Slowly, Ryan agreed, even though slowly was becoming increasingly difficult when Victoria looked at him like he was something precious. The next few weeks found a rhythm. Work continued with its usual intensity, but now Ryan caught Victoria's eye across conference rooms and saw something warm underneath the professional competence. They had lunch together twice a week, dinner when Ryan could arrange childcare, coffee on Saturday mornings when Mia was at soccer practice. Victoria started appearing at those soccer games, standing on the sidelines with the other parents, cheering when Mia scored. She came to the apartment for dinner one Sunday and helped Mia with a science project about plant growth, bringing professional-grade research skills to a second-grade assignment in a way that was both excessive and oddly endearing. Miranda watched it all with barely concealed satisfaction, occasionally appearing at Ryan's office door with coffee and knowing smiles. Daniel Mercer sent one final flower arrangement, a small, tasteful bouquet with a note thanking Ryan again and wishing him well, and then gracefully stepped back into being a professional acquaintance who'd once been helped through a dark moment. But it wasn't all smooth. Victoria still retreated sometimes, still got consumed by work in ways that made her unavailable for days. Ryan learned to recognize the signs, clipped text messages, canceled plans, that distance in her eyes that meant she was protecting herself from feeling too much. And each time he did what he'd promised. He stayed steady. He reminded her that he was still there. He didn't let her push him away. 3 weeks after Mia's play, Victoria showed up at Ryan's apartment at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. Ryan answered the door in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, surprised and concerned. "What's wrong?" Victoria looked wrecked, hair disheveled, makeup smudged, still in her work suit. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you decide if you still want to do this." Ryan pulled her inside, closed the door quietly so they wouldn't wake Mia. "Okay, tell me." They sat on the couch, and Victoria took a shaky breath. "I had drinks with my ex-wife tonight, Sarah. We're still in touch occasionally, mostly about financial things from the divorce. And she asked me if I was seeing anyone, and I told her about you, about Mia, and she laughed." Ryan felt anger flash through him. "She laughed?" "She said I'd ruin it, said I was fundamentally incapable of putting a relationship before work, that whoever I was dating would eventually realize I was emotionally unavailable and leave." Victoria's voice was tight. "And the worst part is, she's not wrong. Every relationship I've had has ended the same way. Me choosing the company, me forgetting anniversaries or canceling plans or just not being present enough." "Victoria, I need you to know what you're signing up for. I need you to understand that I'm probably going to hurt you, not on purpose, but because I don't know how to balance this. Because work is where I feel competent, and relationships are where I feel lost." She met his eyes. "And I need you to decide if that's something you can live with. Because if it's not, if you'd rather end this now before it gets harder, I'll understand." Ryan studied her, this brilliant, fierce, terrified woman who'd restructured her company so he could choose freely, who'd shown up at elementary school plays, who'd spent an hour helping a 7-year-old glue construction paper to poster board, who was sitting in his apartment at 11 p.m. asking him to decide if she was worth the risk. "I'm not your ex-wife," Ryan said quietly. "I'm not Sarah or whoever else didn't work out. I'm me. And I already know you sometimes get consumed by work. I already know you struggle with vulnerability. I've watched you retreat and push me away and try to sabotage this at least 3 times now. And you're still here. I'm still here. Because relationships aren't about being perfect. They're about trying, about communicating when things are hard, about choosing each other even when it's inconvenient." Ryan took her hand. "You showed up tonight instead of spiraling alone. You told me what you're afraid of instead of just disappearing. That's not being emotionally unavailable, Victoria. That's being brave." "I don't feel brave." "No one feels brave when they're actually being brave. They just feel terrified and do the thing anyway." Victoria's laugh was watery, almost a sob. "I really like you. More than like, and that's terrifying. I know, you've mentioned that several times. But you're not running away." "No, because I'm falling for you too, and I'm just as terrified. But I'm also willing to see where this goes if you are." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, not gentle this time, but with the intensity of someone who'd been holding back and finally couldn't anymore. Ryan kissed her back, let the moment stretch into something that felt like promise, like possibility, like the beginning of something real. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling through tears. "I want to try, really try, not just show up sometimes, but actually build something with you." "Okay, then that's what we'll do. I'm going to mess up. Probably. I'm going to mess up too. That's allowed. And when I do, when I get too focused on work or forget to check in, then you'll apologize and we'll figure it out and move forward. Like adults. Like partners." Victoria nodded slowly. "Partners. I like that." "Me too." They talked until almost 1 a.m., about expectations and boundaries, about how to navigate work and relationship, about what Mia needed to see and understand as this became more serious. Victoria admitted she'd been looking at parenting books, trying to figure out how to be good at the stepmother thing, if it came to that. Ryan admitted he'd been terrified of introducing them because Mia's opinion mattered more than anything. "She likes you," Ryan said. "She asked when you were coming over again." "Really? Really?" You're the interesting adult who takes her drawing seriously and asks good questions about her science projects. You're winning her over." Victoria's smile was brilliant. That's really good to hear." When Victoria finally left, Ryan stood in his doorway and watched her walk to her car, watched her turn back to wave before getting in. The night air was cold, but Ryan felt warm in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Back inside, he checked on Mia, still asleep, peaceful, unaware that her father's life was shifting into shapes that included someone new. Ryan stood in her doorway the way he often did, watching her breathe, and made a silent promise that he'd protect this, that he'd make sure Victoria's presence in their lives was careful and healthy and good, that Mia would always come first, even when his heart was pulling him in complicated directions. The next 2 months unfolded with a carefully balanced intensity. Work remained demanding. Ryan's role as chief of staff required constant attention, and Victoria's leadership of the company never stopped being all-consuming, but they found pockets of time. Saturday morning coffee while Mia was at soccer, dinner at the apartment once a week, Victoria arriving with groceries and cooking skills that surprised Ryan, text messages throughout the day that kept them connected even when they were physically apart. Victoria was learning to set boundaries with work, to say no to late meetings when she'd committed to dinner with Ryan and Mia, learning to be present during the time they had together instead of checking her phone constantly. It wasn't perfect. She still occasionally got pulled into crises that consumed entire weekends. Still sometimes went a few days where she was too overwhelmed to do anything but work and sleep. But she was trying. And when she slipped, she acknowledged it, apologized, and did better next time. Ryan was learning too. Learning to let someone in, to accept help, to not carry everything alone. When Mia got sick with the flu and Ryan was drowning in work deadlines, Victoria showed up with soup and medicine and took over for the afternoon so Ryan could finish his projects. When his car died and needed expensive repairs, Victoria offered to loan him one of her cars without making it weird or transactional. She was becoming part of their lives in ways that felt natural, necessary, right. Miranda watched it all with satisfaction, occasionally pulling Ryan aside to note how much happier Victoria seemed, how she was smiling more in meetings, how she'd actually left the office at 6:30 last Thursday. "You're good for her," Miranda said one afternoon. "Better than she probably deserves, but definitely what she needs." "She's good for me too." "I know. You're less haunted, more present, like you remember you're allowed to be happy." December arrived with its particular chaos: holiday events at Mia's school, year-end deadlines at work, the general intensity of trying to close out a successful year. Ryan was managing it all with the careful precision he'd perfected over 3 years of single parenting. But now he had Victoria asking if he needed help, offering to handle the shopping or the gift wrapping or just be an extra pair of hands. On a Friday evening, 2 weeks before Christmas, Victoria came to the apartment with a proposal. They were sitting on the couch after Mia had gone to bed, comfortable in the way they'd become over the past months. "I want to introduce you to my mother," Victoria said abruptly. Ryan looked up from his laptop. "Your mother?" "She lives in Pittsburgh. I haven't seen her in almost a year because I'm terrible at maintaining family relationships, but I want her to meet you. And Mia. I want her to know I'm trying to do this differently." "Differently how?" "Differently than my marriages. Differently than every other relationship I've sabotaged by choosing work over people." Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tightly. "I want her to meet the person who makes me want to be better." Ryan closed his laptop. "When? Christmas? I know that's a big ask. I know the holidays are important family time and you have traditions with Mia. But maybe we could drive to Pittsburgh Christmas Eve, spend the day with my mother, then come back in time for Christmas morning?" Ryan thought about it. Christmas had been just him and Mia for 3 years, quiet and small and safe. Expanding that to include Victoria's mother felt huge, but it also felt like the natural progression of what they were building, like the next step in becoming a real family instead of just people carefully circling each other. "Okay," Ryan said, "let's do it." Victoria's smile was brilliant with relief and joy. "Really? Really? But you have to tell Mia. She needs to understand what this means." The next morning, Victoria sat at Ryan's kitchen table with Mia
and explained that she had a mother in Pittsburgh who really wanted to meet them. Mia listened with the seriousness she brought to important conversations. "Is she nice?" Mia asked. "She's wonderful. A little chaotic and very loud, but wonderful." "Will she like me?" "She's going to love you. I've already told her all about you." Mia considered this. Then, "Can I bring my drawings to show her?" Victoria's expression went soft. She would love that. Christmas Eve arrived with Ryan's nerves stretched tight. They loaded Victoria's car at 6 a.m., presents, luggage, snacks for the drive, Mia's folder of drawings. The drive to Pittsburgh took 7 hours with stops, Mia entertaining herself with books and games in the back seat, Victoria and Ryan trading off driving duties. Victoria's mother lived in a small house in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. She met them at the door, a woman in her 60s with Victoria's eyes, and a warmth Victoria had never shown at work. She pulled Victoria into a hug that lasted long enough to make Victoria's shoulders relax, then turned her attention to Ryan and Mia. "You must be Ryan. And this beautiful girl must be Mia." She crouched down to Mia's level. "I'm Helen. It's so nice to meet you." Mia, who was sometimes shy with new people, smiled. "Hi. I brought drawings to show you. I cannot wait to see them." The afternoon was chaotic in the best way. Helen fed them lunch she'd been cooking since dawn, asked Ryan questions about his work and his life that were curious without being intrusive, and spent an hour looking at Mia's drawings with genuine attention. She pulled out photo albums showing Victoria as a child, awkward school pictures, shots of her at various ages, evidence of a life before she became the controlled CEO Ryan knew. "She was always so serious," Helen said, pointing to a picture of 10-year-old Victoria frowning at the camera. "Even as a little girl, always determined to prove she was strong enough." "I had to be," Victoria said quietly. "Things were hard." They were. "But you didn't always have to carry it alone." Helen looked at Ryan. "I'm glad she's learning that now." That evening, after Mia had fallen asleep on the couch and Helen had gone to get more coffee, Victoria pulled Ryan onto the back porch. The Pittsburgh winter was cold, but they stood close for warmth. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said, "for being willing to do this. Thank you for inviting us. Your mother's wonderful. She likes you. A lot. She pulled me aside earlier and said you were the best thing that's happened to me in years." "She's not wrong," Victoria laughed. "No, she's not." She turned to face him fully. "I need to tell you something. Something I've been trying to figure out how to say for weeks." Ryan's heart rate picked up. "Okay. I love you. I'm in love with you. With your daughter. With the life you've built, and the way you see the world, and the way you make me want to be better than I thought I could be." Victoria's voice was steady, but her eyes were vulnerable. "And I know that's huge. I know it's terrifying, but I needed you to know." Ryan felt something in his chest crack open, the last protective barrier he'd been holding on to finally giving way. "I love you too. I've been falling for months and I'm tired of being careful about it." "So we're doing this, really doing this. We're really doing this." Victoria kissed him there on her mother's back porch, with Pittsburgh's lights spreading out below them, and Mia safe inside and the future finally feeling like something other than just survival. When they pulled apart, Ryan was smiling. "Merry Christmas, Victoria." "Merry Christmas, Ryan." They drove back to the city Christmas morning, arriving at Ryan's apartment by noon. They spent the rest of the day there, opening presents, making dinner together, watching Mia play with her new toys. It was simple. Ordinary. Exactly what Ryan had needed for 3 years without knowing how to ask for it. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ryan and Victoria sat on the couch with coffee and the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. "What happens now?" Victoria asked. "What does this look like going forward?" "I don't know. We figure it out as we go." "That's terrifying." "Everything good is terrifying, but we're doing it anyway." Victoria leaned against him. "I'm still going to mess up sometimes. Still going to get too focused on work or forget to communicate and I'm still going to be patient and we'll figure it out. Because that's what people who love each other do." "People who love each other," Victoria repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." "Me too."
They sat there for a long time, comfortable in the quiet apartment with Mia asleep down the hall and the future stretching out ahead of them. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real, built on trust and patience and the willingness to keep choosing each other, even when it was hard. 3 months later, on a regular Tuesday morning, Ryan arrived at work to find a single white rose on his desk. No card, no explanation, just intention. Just Victoria's way of saying she saw him, she chose him, she was still here. Ryan smiled and sent her a text.
Thank you, Victoria. Always. And standing in his office with spring light filtering through the windows and a white rose in a simple vase, Ryan thought about how far he'd come from the invisible single father who'd been terrified of being seen. Thought about Victoria learning to be vulnerable, about Mia thriving with more love in her life, about the family they were building from careful choices and honest communication. He'd survived 3 years of grief and single parenting and carefully maintained invisibility. But he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living, really living, with someone who saw all of him, the father, the professional, the man who'd learned to be brave enough to let someone in. Ryan picked up the rose, breathed in its subtle scent, and got to work. Because this was his life now. Complicated and messy and beautiful. Exactly as it should be. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, that was more than enough. It was everything.